Hey, everybody, I'm Jason Mefford, and I'm back with Brad Miller, and we're walking a spiritual path. Now, I know in some previous episodes we had talked about the element of fire and the element of water, and today we would talk about air. And then at some point we're going to get back to Earth as well, but we kind of left Earth for the last one because it seems like most people, with crystals and other things like that, are doing a lot with Earth. And so we wanted to talk about the other three elements to begin with. So air, this is an interesting one, right? All I need is the air that I breathe and to love you. Can't remember who was the one that sang that, but actually, there's a lot of truth and a lot of simplicity actually in those song lyrics as well. So yeah, I guess
Yeah.
when we think about air, right? How do we use the element of air? What does that look like? Kind of practically, and as we talk through,
Mhm.
because I know, for me, it's probably the one that I know the least about, but it's actually one that I think we all have much more interaction with than we actually realize.
hmm Yeah. Yeah. Because air is super important. Like air is life. We talked about water before and that without water for a couple of days, you'll die. Well, you've got like 3 minutes without air and you're done for.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, that's how important the element of air is to life. But like you said, most of the time it's something we just kind of take for granted. We don't really
Mhm.
think about. It's just kind of there. And we just assume that it's around us and that we're always going to have it,
Mhm.
and so it's easy to just kind of like, oh, air, whatever, not a big deal. Because it's not really front and center. It's invisible, so you don't see it like you see fire, or you don't see it like we see water.
Right.
Um, and since we use sight as our kind of primary sense most of the time, it's a lot of times it's something that we just don't pick up and don't think about. And so I think this one is a really important one. Um, out there. And like I said, I think there's different things that you can do with it, and it'll be interesting to see what kind of things we come up with today on that. But
Yeah, because I think what's interesting is, everybody that's listening, Brad and I as well, are breathing right now. Right, because if we
presumably
weren't
so, yeah.
if we weren't breathing, right, like you said, at least every few minutes, I mean, you can hold your breath for a
Mhm.
while, but then you'll end up passing out, right? And it's interesting that there's kind of this defense mechanism in our body. You can't you can hold your breath, but then you're going to pass out and your body just starts involuntarily breathing
Takes
again,
over. Yep.
right? And so I think, one of the biggest ways is our breath, or what some people call prana, as well, for those that are, involved in yogic type of different practices. There's a lot of different breathing exercises that are often done in certain yogic meditations. There's also things like holotropic breath work and breath work in general,
Mhm.
where you're breathing in different patterns and doing some different things that actually can take you. And what's interesting, because Stan and Christina Groff came up with holotropic breath work, but actually following that and in the right way, because you can't really like do it by yourself per se, but it has the same psychedelic type of expanded consciousness, even by just using breath instead of taking a particular drug, right? Which is it's an interesting, kind of concept as well. And so, breath is so important for us, but it's probably the one that we take the most for granted as well, because like you said, we don't see it. We're just involuntarily doing it. We're not thinking about breathing all the
Mhm.
time. And so, one simple, easy way to is just placing more awareness on
Mhm.
your breath and actually breathing, right? And like I said, there's lots of different breathing exercises that are out there. that you can do. But I think that's, like you said, it's one that we probably don't think about, but we're all using every single day.
Yeah. I mean, taking a breath is really powerful. You talked about the holotropic breath work is one thing, but even just using breath to calm yourself down, for instance. If you take deep breaths, my daughter gets worked up a lot of the time. She gets very emotional about something and she start tensing up and you can see that the eyes starting to well and everything else. And we tell her, take some deep breaths. Just take a deep breath and let it all out.
Yep.
Just take another deep breath, hold it maybe a little bit, and just let it all out. And that calms down her system. It allows some of those negative emotions to be released. It's a great way to release emotion is through breathing through them. Um, and it's a way to center yourself, to kind of becoming more aware of the present. When a lot of times, a lot of meditations will have a breathing component where you start by focusing on your breath. So you'll take deep breaths, maybe, but they want you to kind of visualize your breath, your lungs expanding, or your diaphragm expanding and contracting, and the air moving through your body, and different visualization techniques to help get your mind off of all the other stuff that's going on in the world and focus just on where you are right now in one little thing. And that's a great way to calm your mind is through focusing on your breath. But again, that's just kind of the tip of the iceberg when it comes to things you can do with your breath.
Well, it is because actually, the interesting thing too is, you talked about the visualization while you're breathing,
Mhm.
which is another, it's a great way of doing this because everything is in layers too, right? And so, like you said, when your daughter starts to get kind of, anxious, we have that colloquialism of take a breath, right? For a
Mhm.
reason is, when we take a deep breath or take a few deep breaths, just physiologically, our body changes, right? Because most of us actually breathe rather shallow, and
Mhm.
even just focusing and taking a few deep breaths actually makes a huge difference. And so, obviously, it does it physiologically because of the oxygen coming into our body. But when you visualize it, you're actually doing a lot of things energetically as well that come back to kind of the whole spiritual metaphysical side that we're talking about here too, right? So as you're breathing in, you're bringing energy into your body, right? You can visualize that air kind of cleaning your body, if you will. And as you exhale, right, that negative energy or the energy that no longer serves you can be given back, right, into the air. And so, it's a way for us, again, from an Eine perspective, right, to be grateful for breath that we're bringing in from the world, but then we're also sharing our breath, right, with the world as well, right? So it's a reciprocity. We're receiving, we're giving, we're receiving, we're giving, the whole time that we're actually breathing. And what's interesting is, a lot of people don't realize this, but I've been taught this. And think about all the things your body does normally. And a lot of times we think of it as, oh, that's disgusting, right? Like before we started recording, I had a big sneeze. Well, guess what? That's air, right? So
Mhm.
every time we sneeze, right? And usually, again, when people sneeze, right, we usually say Gesundheit or bless you, right? And so, again, think about that every time you sneeze, you're actually expelling, right, energies that you no longer need. And so, yes, bless me. Thank you. Bless me. Bless you, Brad, right? Every time we sneeze. Well, guess what? It's the same thing with burps. It's the same thing with farts. Okay. And those are all air,
Mhm.
right? And so a lot of times it's when you're processing or getting hit with energy, a lot of times you might start burping, you might start farting more, and it's normal. right? And the thing is especially here in the US, we're like, oh, that's bad. You can't burp in front of people. You can't fart in front of people. But the older I've gotten, it's like you don't want to hold that in, right? If it's ready to come out, your body wants it to come out, let it out, right? And this is
Mhm.
part of, again, our interaction with air. And it's actually a good thing, when this happens to you, because again, you're clearing something, which again is allowing something new to come in.
Yeah, it's a chance to get rid of stuff that you
Mhm.
don't need, like you said. Um, so kind of along the lines of the idea of visualizing the breath, another thing that I've been caught is the idea of, think about, and I think we've talked about maybe this in a previous episode about your chakras. So
Mhm.
you've got chakras, you've got all the different energy points in your body. And so you can visualize the air coming and taking maybe, your heart chakra and breath coming in and helping to spin that chakra and get the energy flowing and then moving it throughout your body. You can help loosen up some of those or,
Mhm.
align some of those chakras and things using nothing but your breath and kind of visualizing of that energy being transported through that. I guess to kind of show how powerful that can be, all those things
Well,
you're doing
it's
just by breathing it, right?
yeah, and it's interesting because you were saying that too. I remember. I think its name was Sarno, Sarneo, I believe Sarno, something like that. He was a medical doctor who did some research on especially back pain, because a lot of people have pain in their back, and there's really no like logical reason why some of this happens, but it's really trapped energy. But what he found was, if you focused like sending, again, we're thinking about this imaginatively, right? Of sending your breath or sending oxygen to those parts of your body that are hurting, it actually helps to reduce the pain, right? Because again, it's like that air and the oxygen going to those parts of your body actually help it to heal, help it to
Mhm.
release that energy that's causing the pain. And again, you might be sitting there thinking, "Oh, Jason, that's a bunch of hooey." Well, I do that, right? It's a practice that I've been taught, and
Mhm.
so, specifically when I have pain in parts of my body, I again imagine, right, and visualize my breath coming in, and then what I do is I'm visualizing that when I exhale, even though I know I'm exhaling out my nose or my mouth, I imagine that that air is going to that part of my body that is in pain or discomfort and is going out my body through that particular point. So if I have, maybe a place in my back that's I'm feeling discomfort, I'll just sit down for a few minutes, breathe in, and again, imagine that that breath is going into my lungs and then it goes to that place in my back. And I imagine almost like the air just like shoots out my skin at that point. And if you sit and do that, with attention for a few minutes, you'll be surprised how much that discomfort actually goes.
Mhm.
And so
Yeah.
again, for me, it's a metaphysical, it's a spiritual, way of actually helping to clear some of that energy. And how is it done? With air,
Air and breath.
right?
Yeah.
Which is what we're talking about.
Yeah. No, my sister is a chiropractor. And so part of what she does is when she's doing adjustments is, she has you take a breath. Maybe you hold your breath and then kind of again, you kind of can picture it kind of in that area where she's working on where maybe you're stiff or sore or out of alignment, or whatever. And then when you let it go, it helps take out all that um, energy or whatever. And, you know, sitting here listening to this, it may sound kind of silly, like it's just your breath. Like, how does your breath make your back feel better or whatever like that? But it works.
It
You
works. I
know?
mean, it's the same thing. We talked about water before, and I think I shared, it seems simple, like taking a drink of water makes a difference, but it's like I've had times where like the energy was just kind of crazy. I felt really heavy, and I take a drink of water, and almost like the minute that it hits my stomach, I get this shudders kind of feeling. I don't know, like my
Mhm.
body shakes a little bit, and poof, it's gone, right? And so I think that's one where, sometimes we think, oh, that's so simple, that can't work.
Right.
But simple works much better than we realize, you know. I can give you a
Oftentimes.
list of 20 things to do, and oh, if I check off all 20, then it'll work. But sometimes it is as simple as just breathing,
Mhm.
as well. And I think, okay, breath is probably one that now when we say it, everybody listening is like, oh yeah, breath, I get it, right?
Right. Breath work and doing stuff. But yeah,
Yeah,
everything.
but there's even a couple of I'll just share two kind of breathing exercises that I've learned that I use when I feel like I need to. Just so people have kind of a practical
Mhm.
way of doing it. One is called 7-Eleven breathing, and it has nothing to do with the convenience store, even if you feel like getting a
Slurpee.
slushy or Slurpee
Yeah.
or whatever it's called, right? But 7-Eleven just means you're spending 7 seconds on your in breath. You're spending 11 seconds on your out breath.
Mhm.
And so what happens is any time that you're spending more time on your out breath, it relaxes your body.
Mhm.
Okay. And so again, you can just kind of sit and count in your head as you're breathing in slowly 7 seconds. Try to get your lungs as full as you can. On the out breath, blow out for 11 seconds until all the air is gone, and then you just do it again. Right. And so
Mhm.
7-Eleven breathing is a way you can do it. For those that have an Apple Watch, right? I have an Apple Watch. I haven't worn it for a little while, but that breathing app on the Apple Watch, right, when it prompts you, hey, it's time to breathe, right, and you hit it, and you just sit there, and you can feel it kind of pulsating on your wrist for when you're supposed to be breathing in, and then it stops and you breathe out. Then it pulsates again as you're breathing in. That's actually set up on a 7-Eleven cycle, which is interesting, right? So again, even with an Apple Watch, you can be doing that 7-Eleven breathing, and that will help you to relax, get more grounded, get more in the present moment. Another one that I've been taught that I use sometimes, I call it tactical breathing, or some people call it box breathing.
Mhm.
I call it tactical breathing because I think it's a cool name, and it's a practice actually that they teach people in special forces in the military. And why did they teach them that? Because when you're in special forces, you get dropped someplace, all hell breaks loose, right? You tend to have anxiety, and so they teach the soldiers how to do this to help, again, ground them, calm them back down so they can think clearly. Because if they let that anxiety take over, then who knows what's going to happen in that spot. And so the way tactical breathing or box breathing works is think 4 4 4 4, right? So it makes a box 4 4 4 4, right? Which is why some people call it box breathing, but it's 4 seconds. So what you do is you breathe in for 4 seconds, you hold it for 4 seconds, you breathe out for 4 seconds, you hold it for 4 seconds, and then you do it again. Sorry, so four on the in breath, hold it for four, four on the out breath, hold it, and then take another breath in. And so that gets you into kind of this box on the breathing. Same thing. It will help you to kind of relax and calm yourself down as well.
Yeah,
So,
yeah, I do that one with the box breathing. I've done that one before. That can work really well. I actually turned off the binging on my watch, the
oh, did
mindful
you?
stuff on there. Yeah, because it was just kept on. The irony is that the binging on my fin actually made me less relaxed.
Two, one, two. So,
So yeah, so I turned that actually off, and then I'm like, I'm cool without that. But but
but
yeah,
some people really, want
yeah,
to use it, and
hmm,
that's what they do. So,
yeah,
so that's a little bit about breath. But
hmm,
even as we've been talking, or as we were, kind of starting this, there's actually some other air principles that people might not actually realize. And
hmm,
one is one that I really like, which is music or sound, right? Because how do we hear? It's through sound waves, right, coming through the air. And
hmm,
so, in a lot of ways, listening to music, certain tones, chanting.
Mhm.
Again, a lot of meditative practices include some chanting or other things like that. That's all using, again, the element of air to be able to help us with that. And it can have a huge impact. I mean, this morning I was listening to a piece of music and I started getting emotional. I started crying, right? Which, again, those of you that know me, it's like, oh, that's no big deal, Jason. You cry all the time when you
It's a
listen to
Wednesday,
music.
right? Like
It's a
it's
Wednesday, whatever, right? But again, that's a way. And so, again, you can think about listening to music in our ears, instruments, air instruments as
Mhm.
well is a way, right? Because it's working on our breathing, but it's also providing us with sound and frequency, which is also an air element that helps us. So things like drums, drums give us the vibration. Things like flutes
Mhm.
actually is our air helping to make it as well. So you're kind of getting double duty on that. And that's why a lot of ancient traditions include some sort of wind instrument that a lot of the holy people or medicine people would play, because that's another way to kind of introduce air into everything.
Mhm. Yep, yep. Music is a big one. But again, you don't really think about it.
No, we
But
don't we don't we don't think about it, but even, for those of you that have been in a sound bath, right, with the
Mhm.
crystal bowls, if you've been there or you've gone to a rock concert, and you're close to the speakers, you can feel that vibration like pulsing through your body, right? A lot of times when I do a sound bath, I can feel the energy like swirling around in the room. And I can feel it hit me and then kind of like go to the other side of the room and come around and bam, hit my body again. Bam, hit my body again, right? And again, those are all sounds and frequencies that are carried over the airwaves, if you will, right?
Mhm. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, so yeah, so kind of back to the actual idea of air, just the idea of fresh air, getting out in nature, going someplace away from, the pollution, the city, and just being able to go out into nature and be able to take a nice deep breath. That clean, fresh air can help clear out everything going on in you, clear out some of the stale air going in your body, help clear out the energies, all the kind of stuff we talked about before. But sometimes getting away into some of these specific areas that you can do will can have a lot of benefits with the air.
Mhm.
I know we talked a couple episodes ago about traveling, and when we went to Asheville, North Carolina, up in the mountains, the air up there just had a little bit of a different quality to it because you were away from a lot of the city, you were away from a lot of kind of the urban areas and the things going on. You're away from the noise and the sound pollution.
Mhm.
And so you just were kind of in a quiet area, just could kind of take a nice deep kind of breath of mountain air and just kind of feel refreshed and cleansed by it. Um,
Mhm.
you know?
Well, and I think, because there's nothing better than um, that clean, fresh air as
Mhm.
well. And I think a lot of times when you're out there in it, especially when you're out in nature, there's also smells,
Mhm.
and smells kind of comes along with this as well. And I think it's, all of the elements kind of have an interaction with each other as well. And
Mhm.
so I think that's where, you can start to also maybe place some awareness on the fact that these things are happening. One element is transmuting into something else often, right?
Mhm.
So if we take, for example, fire, which we talked about before, let's say, I've got some Palo Santo sticks around here, right? Or maybe sage or
Mhm.
sweetgrass or whatever smudging kind of thing that you want to use. And so that's an area where, right, I start off with a Palo Santo stick, earth, right?
Mhm.
I use fire, right, to light it. And as I'm lighting it, right, so that fire and the earth transmute into smoke. air, right? And so, we use that smoke then to cleanse us, but again, it's air, right? It's
Mm-hmm.
a transmutation of earth element and fire into air. Same thing if you're burning candles or something that is scented, right? Same sort of thing, that is transmuting itself into a particular smell or scent.
Mm-hmm.
That also is air element, can be, nourishing and also cleansing at the same time. A lot of it is kind of, dependent on what your intention is, right? So
Mm-hmm.
obviously, if I light Palo Santo, if my intention is just to smell it because I think it smells nice, then that's what I'm going to get. But if I light it with the intention of cleansing my energy, then even though I'm smelling it, I'm going to get the energy cleansing,
Mm-hmm.
from that. And so that's why, again, intention and awareness are so important because we can do the same act, but it depends on our intention as to what we'll actually get out of it, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's interesting because, with smells, because I've done research from, like human learning standpoint. And actually, smells are a way too, even from a learning perspective, because we associate memories and emotions and other things with certain smells.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes smells come our way as well, to remind us of certain things, right? And so, there's certain scents, for example, that when I smell, it reminds me maybe of my grandmother, right? And so that's going to bring in all kinds of emotions and other things like that. It could also be maybe my grandmother's around, right? And she wants to talk to me. And so she's helping to provide a smell or a scent for me that gets me to place my attention and awareness on her and what she's trying to share with me, right? And I've noticed, because we talk about things like animal medicine, right?
Mm-hmm.
Of things like that just showing up. But I've started to notice too that certain smells show up that don't make any sense, right? It's like I was I was sitting on my porch the other day, and I get this smell, and it's like, oh, I recognize that smell. What is that? And it's like, but it's nothing around me physically that really is probably putting off that smell, but for some reason, right, I smelled it. And
Mm-hmm.
and that kind of put me in a particular state or place for whatever reason. So I think sometimes too we can use or think about and start to identify what are we actually smelling, right? And there's
Mm-hmm.
some things like fresh cut wood. Like I had a lot of forest products clients early in my career, so I'd go out to the lumber mills, right? And so you get that sawdust, that cut wood smell. I remember, when we cut trees at our cabin in the mountains, it was the same kind of thing. The sound of the chainsaw, the smell of the cut wood, right? And I just did some tree trimming around my house, so I got some of that same smell again that kind of took me to some of those different places as well. And again,
Yes.
smell is air.
And smell is very like you say, it's very strong link to memories and emotions, like you talked about.
Mhm.
You maybe have your grandmother, you said, has a particular scent, that reminds you of her. You may a particular scent may remind you of the holidays, family gatherings, particularly Christmas time often has scents associated with it. Maybe, at least here in the US, pine, or the idea, maybe the smell of baking, something being baked. A lot of time, cinnamon, some
Mhm.
peppermint, some of those scents we kind of associate with some of the memories that we have, maybe growing up as a child.
Mhm.
Back when we were younger, the family made gingerbread houses, let's say. And so that smell of gingerbread is something you associate. So now when you smell that gingerbread, wherever it is, that memory of the Christmases or the holidays with family and making those houses now come to mind. You know, that's a very powerful connection. And I think a lot of spiritual people kind of get the idea because incense is scent.
Hmm. Hmm.
Incense is that like actually I've got sage burning back here behind me. You know, and just something to, like you said, based on the intention to clear out energy, to, you know, whatever it is. Yes, it smells nice, but what other things are you doing with it? And it's important to be intentional with what that is.
Yeah, because a lot of rituals actually will incorporate things like that,
Hmm.
and you see some of that carry over in religion as well. The Catholic Church, when the priest or whoever it is swinging the incense as they're going through, again, it's what the intention is, but a lot of times that is used as kind of energy clearing,
Hmm.
but it also can be used as well for an offering,
Hmm.
right? Because we talked about before, beings can smell. And so when we're putting stuff out, when we're burning things like incense, they can be both cleansing, but they can also be offerings,
Hmm.
as well. I mean, some of the things I do incorporates a cigar and cigar smoke in some of the rituals that I do, because that is pleasing, right, to certain beings. And I think we talked before about that with cookies and other stuff like that. If we're
Hmm.
actually making offerings, that a lot of times there are smells associated with that. Again, whether
Hmm.
it's something that's burned or whether it's something that's not, right? Because again, a lot of those things take something like rum. Rum has a particular smell, right, with it as well. And so, as it's evaporating and doing what it's doing, it is also kind of putting that out. Sometimes I'll use a bowl or a glass of water and put things like rose oil in it, right? And the same thing, right? That rose oil then is diffused. And so you smell it, right? As well as it being a physical earth element as well.
Yeah, flowers, big when it comes to
Flowers,
scents.
flowers.
That's a huge
Yeah,
one.
and start thinking about, because I think this is one thing too, and I'm still working on this. I mean, I'm having some epiphanies as we're sitting here talking. But it's like, well, isn't it interesting that almost everything has some kind of a smell to it? There's got to be a reason why there's a smell to it, and that certain things like flowers, have a smell. It's more. It has to be for a bigger reason than, oh, it smells nice,
Hmm.
right? Because uh, uh, the masters of the game who are creating everything, it's like there's a much deeper level, probably, of why certain things smell the way they do as well,
Hmm.
because it's doing something to us physically and or on a spiritual level.
Yeah. So I've got one more thing, one more area where it comes to air, and that is flight.
Mm.
So we're talking here a lot about birds,
Hmm.
the idea of soaring, the idea of the freedom of flight. I know a lot of people, they're the people that like to go parachuting, you know, to jump out of perfectly good airplanes, and feel the sensation
Of the
the foam
wind.
of the
Yeah.
wind going through their hair at, you know, 150 miles an hour, whatever it is. But just that sensation, and then looking out the window and seeing a bird gliding, you know, a hawk or something else flying out there, or even, you know, small little birds, you know, kind of flittering around, hummingbirds. Like
Hmm.
just sitting and watching a hummingbird fly is like a divine experience, you know, as they kind of dart around and they can move backwards in different directions and just kind of hover there and look at you. And like you could spend hours doing stuff like that, and being appreciative of the magic, we'll say, of flight, of
Hmm.
being able to not be attached, have to physically be attached to the ground,
Mhm.
being suspended in air. I know for me, I am an Aquarius, which is an air symbol. But also the vulture we talked about before is special to me.
Mhm. Mhm.
And vulture actually takes some of the scent in it with it. Because a lot of times vultures will use their sense of scent to smell carrion and dead things, and they use that to kind of help figure out where they need to go. But I love to watch the vultures just soar, circle in the air, up popping up on the wind currents, on the updrafts, and they just soar for hours, just kind of gracefully gliding, and all that. That's all air.
The solar too. Well, and even wind, right?
Hmm.
In nature, the weather
Yep.
activity of air, right? Is, and I think we talked about this on it before, or maybe you and I had talked about it, but wind from weather perspective has always been one of those that's been hardest for me to deal with
Hmm.
because it just feels like, especially if it's a cold, strong wind, it's just like I can't get away from it. And it's
Hmm.
like even though you're bundled up, it's like the air just kind of goes through everything and it gets you down to the core. But wind from weather pattern is so important too. It clears out things, it brings things in. And so I've learned to be much more appreciative of the wind. And there is a lot of power in the wind as well. And so, next time you have a big windstorm in your area, just try something different, right? That I do sometimes. Go outside when it's really windy with the intention of receiving power from the wind and do that for a few minutes and see how you feel. There is tremendous power in the wind, right? And like I said, it's clearing things out, it's bringing things as well. In
Hmm.
fact, yesterday I was talking to somebody that, lives in Florida and it's hurricane season, and he was talking about the Sahara sands effect. And I'm like, what? And apparently, right, the sand dust from the Saharan desert, which is in Africa, is somehow making its way in the weather patterns into that Gulf area where it's hurricane time, and that dust carried from the wind of Sahara Desert in Africa is going to have an effect on the weather in Florida. And I already kind of knew this a little bit because I'd heard other things about, some of the dust from deserts ending up in places like Brazil and other places that, we don't realize, just like birds, how far and how much of an impact over a distance things like air actually have. When you think about things like birds migrating, and I don't know how they do this, right? But some little tiny birds, go down to Brazil in our wintertime, and then they fly back to North America in the spring. There's a lot of water between Brazil and like the eastern US, where a lot of these birds are migrating. And yet somehow those little tiny birds get by without food, presumably for however long, and the currents of the air and everything else help them to get from Brazil to the eastern US. And in fact, wind and weather patterns also have an interaction with the ocean, as well, and
Hmm.
some of the currents and other things that are happening. And so, when we start really kind of placing awareness and understanding of how all of these elements really are working together, it's to me, it's just fascinating
Hmm.
how it all works. And I think, again, one of the reasons we're talking about air is because I think a lot of us don't place very much awareness or attention on air and how important it actually is.
Yeah, and just how powerful it can be.
Oh yeah.
It can
Oh,
help birds fly thousands of miles. It can bring dust halfway across the globe. Like,
well, it can literally destroy everything. I mean, if you've ever been seen a hurricane or a tornado,
Tornadoes. Yep. I've seen the
it's there
devastation.
is massive power and devastation that can be, in that way. And it's just like everything else. There's destruction, there's rebirth and growth, right?
Hmm.
And so nature helps us, in that instance as well, to be able to see, live examples of that even in the weather
Hmm.
patterns.
Yep. Um,
Mhm.
so there you got it. Air, maybe the most underappreciated of all the elements. Um, you know, part of the four. So when you probably don't want to leave out. Um, maybe not as sexy sometimes as fire, or some of the things you do with water, but again, I think this is one of those important things to kind of keep aware. Like you said, it's something that's usually not in our attention.
Well, and
Hopefully
I
it is
think,
now.
and there's probably a bigger lesson for us too, in that, like you said, physically, our bodies cannot survive for more than a few minutes without air. And, the fact that we're probably underappreciating it, I think for me, the two that are probably the most underappreciated are water and air, because we don't realize,
Hmm.
same thing. You die much quicker without water than you do without food,
Hmm.
right? But air is the one that we cannot live without, right? For more than a few minutes. Water, a few days, and that's it, right? Food, you can
Hmm.
go 30, 40, 50 days without food and you're still okay. And maybe there's a lesson for us there, as well. And maybe we do need to be placing more attention and awareness and gratitude on things like air and water, and not forget them not, because of how important they
Hmm.
actually are.
Yep. All right. Well, thank you guys for listening here. Us blow a lot of air at you. Hopefully it
Hot
wasn't.
air, blowing hot air at
That's
you.
right. Hopefully something got you and resonated with you this week, and we'll bring you some more fun stuff again next episode.
All right, sounds good, everybody. Have a great week. And remember to breathe. And
Otherwise,
we'll
you won't
see
be
you
here
in
for
the next
next episode.
episode.
So yeah.
Exactly. All
See
right, see you,
ya.
everybody.